Michael Ondaatje himself needs no real introduction. He was here before reading. If you have the brown sheet, then you already know about his peregrinations from Ceylon through England and London, Ontario to Toronto. And you know about his 3 books, The Dainty Monster, The Man with 7 Toes, and the collected works of Billy the Kid. And I should mention that his next book, which is called Rat Jelly, will be coming out in a month or so. Coach House Press.
See the rat in the jelly, steaming, dirty hair, frozen. Bring it out on a glass tray, split the pie 4 ways and eat. I took great care cooking this treat for you, and though it looks good to you, and though it smells of the Westinghouse still, and tastes of exotic fish or maybe the expensive ass of a cow, I want you to know it's rat. Steamy, dirty hair, and still alive. Caught him last Sunday, thinking of the fridge, thinking of you. And some of you may know that poem was written then a couple of months later, as if to prove my art of prophecy. There was a headline in the paper and it said, "Some rat droppings in food acceptable in the US." And I'll read you a section from it. The US government yesterday disclosed for the first time the maximum amount of rat droppings, mold, flies, worms, and other contaminants it allows in processed food. The foods in which defects can be found in varying degrees include chocolate, vegetables, fruit, eggs, fish, flour, spices, grains, coffee, nuts, and jam. Examples of the limits include 4 rodent hairs in 225 grams of chocolate, 100 million bacteria per gram of dried eggs, 5 rodent pellet fragments, or 2 pellets and 1 detached hair, per 50 grams of cornmeal, and 1 rodent pellet per pint of wheat. In Ottawa, health officials deny that Canada has similar standards. Gold and black. At night, the gold and black slashed bees come, pluck my head away. Vague thousands drift, leave brain naked, stark as liver. Each one carries atoms of flesh. They walk my body in their fingers. The mind stinks out. In the black, Kim is turning a Geiger counter to this pillow. She cracks me open like a light bulb. Love, the real, terrifies the dreamer in his riot cell. And this is in the form of a letter to Ann Landers. Dear Ann Landers, I get really turned on by flies crawling over my body. I keep telling my husband of 14 years that this is normal, and that people all over the world feel the same way. But he says he feels jealous, especially as I'm always tired when he comes to bed. It is true, Anne, I do feel worn out. It is the flies. I mean, it are the flies. After an hour or 2 with them, I'm finished and don't want anyone else touching me. My husband thinks putting honey on my body is going too far. I love my husband, Anne. Would you please reply to this so I could show him your answer and make him feel not so left out of things? I want to read a couple of poems on herons. One is quite an early one, which appeared in my first book, and the second one is more recent. Birds for Janet, the heron. The reach, fingers stretching backbones, the dull burst of fur 4 feet above water. Reflections make them an hourglass. When heron sits, the hairless ankle rests on a starved knee. He fingers his food off the leaf of banana, drinks from a stone container, bathes in blue zebra milk. When he sleeps, the soul is jailed in tightened claws, torn if he dies in the night. Heron is the true king. Eagles only, muscular henchmen, with mad eyes bedded in black fur. We found the path of a heron's suicide, tracks left empty, walking to the center of the lake. Best herons are not beautiful, but handsome. And this one, I hadn't realized the suicide connection actually until I'd finished this one. This is called Heron Rex. Mad kings, bloodlines introverted, strained pure, so the brain runs into the wrong direction. They are proud of their heritage of suicides, not the ones who went mad, balancing on that goddamn leg, but those whose eyes turned off the sun and imagined it. Those who looked north, those who forced their feathers to grow in, those who couldn't find the muscles in their arms, who drilled their beaks into the skin, those who could speak and lost themselves in the foul connections, who crashed against black bars in a dream of escape, those who moved round the dials of imaginary clocks, those who fell asleep and never woke, who never slept and so dropped dead, those who attacked the casual eyes of children and were led away, and those who faced corners forever, those who exposed themselves and were led away, those who pretended broken limbs, epilepsy, who managed to electrocute themselves on wire, those who felt their skin was on fire and screamed and were led away. There are ways of going physically mad when you perfect the mind, where you sacrifice yourself for the race, when you are the representative, when you allow yourself to be paraded in the cages. Celebrity, a razor in the body. These small birds, so precise, frail as morning neon, they are royalty melted down. They are the glass core at the heart of kings. Yet 15-year-old boys could enter the cage and break them in minutes, as easily as a long fingernail. War machine. Think I don't like people. No. Like some, don't like many. Love wife, kids, dogs, a couple of friends. Hate art, which what all talk about, all the time is what they talk about. Like Monopoly, Tatopoly, cards, ping pong, tennis, late movies, Hitchcock, Sergio Leone, movie Scandal. Oh, I can tell you stories, 30 Jane Mansfield stories that will give erections all around the room. They'll come at you like non-fiction whips. Stories too about Vivian Leigh, Princess Margaret, Frank Sinatra the night he beat up Mia Farrow. Perhaps would like to live mute all day long, not talk, just listen to the loathing. Now this poem was another earlier poem, which was after I had my appendix out. Not very much happens to people, to me anyway, so one has to find drama wherever you can. Signature. The car carried him, racing the obvious moon, beating in the trees like a white bird. Difficult to make words sing around your appendix. The obvious upsets me. Everyone has scars which crawl into the mystery of swimming trunks. I was the first appendix in my family. My brother, who was given the stigma of a rare blood type, proved to have ulcers instead. So the rain fell like applause as I approached the hospital. It takes 7 seconds, she said. Strapped my feet, entered my arm. I stretched all senses. On 5, the room closed on me like an eyelid. At night, the harmonica plays, a whistler joins in respect. I'm a sweating marble saint full of Demerol and sleeping pills. A man in the armor of shining plaster walks to my door, then past. Imagine the rain falling like white bees in the sidewalk. Imagine Snyder high on poetry and mountains. 3 floors down, my appendix swims in a jar. O world, I shall be buried all over Ontario. Billboards. My wife's problems with previous husbands, houses, her children that I meet at stations in Kingston, in Toronto, in London, Ontario, They come down the grey steps, bright as actors after their drugged 4-hour ride of spilled orange juice and comics. When will they produce a gun and shoot me at Union Station by Gate 4? Reunions for Easter egg hunts, kite flying, Christmas. They descend on my shoulders every holiday. All this, I was about to say, disturbs, invades my virgin past. When she lay beginning this anthology of kids, I moved, blind but senses, jutting faux pas, terrible humor, shifted with a sea of persons, breaking when necessary into smaller, self-sufficient bits of mercury. My mind a carefully emptied diary till I hit the barrier reef that was my wife. There, the right bright fish among the coral. With her came the locus of her history, innuendo she had missed, varied attempts at seduction, even rape, dogs who had been bred and killed by taxis or brain disease. Numerous problems I was unequal to. Here was I trying to live with a neutrality so great I'd have nothing to think of, just to sense and kill it in the mind. Nowadays I somehow get the feeling I'm in a complex situation, one of several billboard posters blending in the rain. I am writing this with a pen my wife has used to write a letter to her first husband. On it is the smell of her hair. She must have placed it down between sentences and thought and driven her fingers round her skull, gathered the slightest smell of her head and brought it back to my pen. This is called Beaver, and there's a quote at the beginning from one of the explorers who recounts the legend of the beaver. The Great Spirit was angry with the beaver and ordered Bisakajak the flatterer to drive them all from the dry land into the water, and they became and continued very numerous. But the Great Spirit has been and now is very angry with them, and they are now all to be destroyed. Beaver, beaver, slick wet hair, diver to the roots of air, you appear, eyes washed out, camouflaged. I've seen your remnants of noise, the sound of one hand clapping when I turn and witness blank lake. You have left invisible as bullets. You take your dark traffic away from the sun. If I was beginning again, I'd want to be beaver in this wet territory. Plucking his way through slime to nozzle branch, he shapes forests in the image of his small star brain. Only low-flying craft and beasts have seen the chaos plan. Only drunk architects have imagined the bloated structures, the lush corruption of his victims. Industry proposing sloth, maggot introversion. So all will go dark, deep, dark, black, deep, till all his lands and seas shall sing the humming quiet of the carbon. This one is called Sullivan and the Iguana. The iguana is a comedian, erasing his body to death. He is a gladiator retired after performance, a general waiting for war overseas. He is as secure about his sex as Tiresias, thought Sullivan, his feet on the table. In the room, he looks across to his green friend sleeping over the bulb, who has ignored the clover and vetch that Sullivan picked in deserted lots. Sullivan is alone, coiling in the room's light. From his window, he looks down onto the traffic, people's heads. He leaves his garbage and soiled grit outside the door. The room has little furniture. He pours meals out of tins and packages, and after midnight aims his body to the bed. From there, every few weeks, Sullivan watches the ancient friend undress out of his skin in the rectangle of light and become young and brilliant green. Sullivan's brain exercises under the flesh. Sullivan, thought the iguana, can turn the light on, can turn it off, can open the cage, can hand in clover or hand in lettuce, can forget to change the water. One of my basic problems, I think, has been this element in me that realizes that nothing famous happened on my birth date. And I've bought things like the Esquire Book of Drinks, which has a thing at the back, and other such books. But nothing much has happened. Dates. It becomes apparent that I miss great occasions. My birth was heralded by nothing but the anniversary of Winston Churchill's marriage. No monuments bled, no instruments agreed on a specific weather. It was a seasonal insignificance. So I console myself with my mother's 8th month. While she sweated out her pregnancy in Salon, the servant ambling over the lawn with a tray of iced drinks, a few friends visiting her to placate her shape, and I drinking the lifelines. Wallace Stevens sat down in Connecticut, a glass of orange juice at his table, so hot he wore only shorts, and on the back of a letter began to write the well-dressed man with the beard. That night, while my mother slept, her significant belly cooled by the bedroom fan, Stevens put words together that grew to sentences and shaved them clean and shaped them, the page suddenly becoming thought where nothing had been, his head making his hand move where he wanted, and he saw his hand was saying, "The mind is never finished, no, never." And I in my mother's stomach was growing, as were the flowers outside the Connecticut windows. Notes for the legend of Salad Woman. Since my wife was born, she must have eaten the equivalent of 2/3 of the original Garden of Eden. Not the dripping lush fruit, or the meat in the ribs of animals, but the green salad gardens of that place. The whole arena of green would have been eradicated, as if the right filter had been removed, leaving only the skeleton of coarse brightness. All green ends up eventually churning in her left cheek. Her mouth is a laundromat of spinning, drowning herbs. She is never in fields, but is sucking the pith out of grass. I have noticed the very leaves from flower decorations grow sparse in their week-long performance in our house. The garden is a dust bowl. On our last day in Eden, as we walked out, she nibbled the leaves at her breasts and crotch, but there's none to touch, none to equal the chlorophyll kiss. We have this quite strange dog, which is able to sing, among one of his abilities. Somebody was saying that all the dogs have been removed from Iceland, by the way. I don't know if this is news or not. Anyway, this dog is saying, and he sings various songs, including, as you know, American national anthem and kind of protest against foreign policy. You Are My Sunshine is kind of to honor American culture. It's an offense most of the time. But anyway, this dog is able to sing. This poem is called Postcard from Piccadilly Street. Dogs are the unheralded voyeurs of this world. When we make love, the spaniel shudders, walks out of the room. She's had her fill of children now. But the basset, for whom we've pretty soon got to find a love object apart from furniture or visitors' legs, jumps on the bed and watches. It is a catching habit, having a spectator, and appeals to the actor in both of us. In spite of irate phone calls from the SPCA, who claim we are corrupting minors, the dog. We have moved to elaborate audiences now. At midnight we open the curtains, turn out the light, and imagine the tree outside, full of sparrows with infrared eyes. One more dog poem. This is called The Strange Case. My dog's assumed my alter ego has taken over, walks the house, phallus hanging wealthy and raw in front of guests, nuzzling head-up skirts, while I direct my Mandarin mood. Last week, driving the babysitter home, she, unaware dog sat in the dark back seat, talked on about the kid's behavior. On Huron Street, the dog leaned forward and licked her ear. The car going 40 miles an hour, she seemed more amazed at my driving ability than my indiscretion. It was only the dog, I said. Oh, she said, me interpreting her reply all the way home. White room. Dear, thin lady, you bend over your stomach and your body is cool fruit. Skin covers stray bones on your back as sand envelops scattered fragments of a wrecked aircraft. You are bending over your stomach, I am descending like helicopters onto the plane, and we collapse as flesh within the angles of the room. This last summer we were living north of Kingston, in the country, and I became obsessed with objects on the table. I guess most writers do sometimes, and kind of build out almost accidentally from the objects in front of you. And this poem is called Burning Hills. So he came to write again in the Burnt Hill region north of Kingston, a cabin with mildew spreading down walls, bullfrogs on either side of him. Hanging his lantern of shell Vapona's strip on a hook in the center of the room, he waited a long time, opened the Hilroy writing pad, yellow big pen. Every summer he believed would be his last, this schizophrenic season change, June to September, when he deviously thought out plots across the character of his friends. Sometimes barren as fear going nowhere, or in habit, meaningless as tap water. One year maybe he would come and sit for 4 months and not write a word down, would sit and investigate colors, the insects in the room with him. What he brought: a typewriter, tins of ginger ale, cigarettes, a copy of Strangelove, of The Intervals, a postcard of Rousseau's The Dream. His friend's words were strict as lightning, enclothing the bark of a tree, a shaved hook. The postcard was a test pattern by the window through which he saw growing scenery. Also a map of a city in 1900. Eventually, the room was a time machine for him. He closed the rotting door, sat down, thought of pieces of history. The first girl who in a park near his school put a warm hand into his trousers, unbuttoning and finally catching the spill across her wrist, he in the maze of her skirt. She later played the piano when he had tea with the parents. He remembered that, surprised. He had forgotten for so long. Under raincoats in the park on hot days. Those summers were layers of civilization in his memory. There were old photographs he didn't look at anymore, for girls in them were chubby, not as perfect as in his mind, and his ungovernable hair was shaved to the edge of skin. His friends leaned on bicycles, were 16 and tried to look 21, the cigarettes too big for their faces. He could read those characters easily, undisguised as wedding pictures. He could hardly remember their names, though they had talked all day, exchanged styles, and like dogs on a lawn, hung around the houses of girls, waiting for night and the devious sex games with their simple plots. Sex a game of targets, of throwing firecrackers at a couple in a field, singing dramatically in someone's ear along with the record, "How do you think I feel? You know our love's not real. The one you're mad about is just a gadabout. How do you think I feel?" He saw all that complex tension the way his children would. There is one picture that fuses the 5 summers. 8 of them are leaning against a wall, arms around each other, looking into the camera and the sun, trying to smile at the unseen adult photographer, trying against the glare to look 21 and confident. The summer and friendship will last forever. Except one who was eating an apple, that was him, oblivious to the significance of the moment. Now he hungers to have that arm around the next shoulder. The wretched apple is fresh and white. Since he began burning hills, the shell strip has taken effect. A wasp is crawling on the floor, tumbling over, its motor fanatic. He has smoked 5 cigarettes. He has written slowly and carefully with great love and great coldness. When he finishes, he will go back, hunting for the lies that are obvious. I wrote a series of poems on King Kong, and this is the last when he meets his match. King Kong meets Wallace Stevens. Take 2 photographs, Wallace Stevens and King Kong. Is it significant that I eat bananas as I write this? Stevens is portly, benign, a white brush-cut, striped-tie businessman, but for the dark, thick hands, the naked brain, the thought in him. Kong is staggering, lost in New York streets again, a spawn of annoyed cars at his toes. But the mind is nowhere. Fingers are plastic, electric under the skin. He's at the call of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Meanwhile, WS in his suit is thinking chaos, is thinking fences. In his head, the seeds of fresh pain is exorcising the bellow of locked blood. The hands drain from his jacket to pose in the murderer's shadow. This one is called The Gate in His Head, and it's a line from a poem by Victor Coleman. Victor, the shy mind, revealing the faint scars, colored strata of the brain. Not clarity, but the sense of shift. A few lines, the tracks of thought. Landscape of busted trees, the melted tires in the sun, stands fishbowl with a book inside, turning its pages like some sea animal camouflaging itself. The typeface clarity going slow blonde in the sun-full water. My mind is pouring chaos in nets onto the page. A blind lover, don't know what I love till I write it out. And then from Gibson's your letter, with a blurred photograph of a gull. Caught vision, the stunning white bird, an unclear stir. And that is all this writing should be then. The beautiful formed things caught at the wrong moment, so they are shapeless, awkward, moving to the clear. In that poem, Burning Hills, I talked about that painting by Rousseau, which is the one that really still haunts me after looking at it for several years. It's the one of the woman on the sofa, the naked woman on the sofa in the jungle. If I had the ability to steal a painting from the Museum of Modern Art, I guess that would be my first choice. And this poem is also on that painting. It's called The Vault. Having to put forward candidates for God, I nominate Henri Rousseau and Dr. Buck. Tired of the lizard paradise whose image banks renew off the flesh of others, those stories that hate, which are remnants and insults. I have woken to find myself covered in white sheets, walls, doors, food. There was no food in the world I left, where you ate the rich air. The bodies of small birds who died while flying fell into your mouth. Fruit dripped through your thirst to the earth. All night, the traffic of apes floats across the sky. A worm walks through the gaze of a lion. Some birds live all their evenings on one branch. They are held by the celebration of God's wife. In Rousseau's The Dream, she is the naked lady who has been animal and tree, her breast a suckled orange. The fibers and fluids of their moral nature have seeped within her frame. The hand is outstretched. Her fingers move out in mutual transfusion to the place. Our low speaking last night was barely audible among the grunt of mongrel meditation. She looks to the left, for that is the direction we leave in when we fall from her room of flowers. Griffin of the night. I'm holding my son in my arms, sweating after nightmares. Small me, fingers in his mouth, his other fist clenched in my hair. Small me, sweating after nightmares. A poem by my father. It's called Letters in Other Worlds. I was brought up in Ceylon, so a lot of the references are pretty straightforward, but are about Ceylon. And it begins with a quote from a novel by Jarry, which I've never read, which goes, "For there was no more darkness for him, and no doubt like Adam before the fall, he could see in the dark." My father's body was a globe of fear. His body was a town we never knew. He hid that he had been where we were going. His letters were a room he seldom lived in. In them the logic of his love could grow. My father's body was a town of fear. He was the only witness to its fear dance. He hid that where he had been that we might lose him. His letters were a room his body scared. He came to death with his mind drowning. On the last day he enclosed himself in a room with 2 bottles of gin. Later, fell the length of his body so that brain blood moved to new compartments that never knew the wash of fluid, and he died in minutes of a new equilibrium. His early life was a terrifying comedy, and my mother divorced him again and again. He would rush into tunnels, magnetized by the white eye of trains, and once, gaining instant fame, managed to stop a parahera in Ceylon, the whole procession of elephants, dancers, local dignitaries, by falling dead drunk onto the street. As a semi-official, and semi-white at that, the act was seen as a crucial turning point in the Home Rule movement and led to Ceylon's independence in 1948. My mother had done her share too, her driving so bad she was stoned by villagers whenever her car was recognized. For 14 years of marriage, each of them claimed he or she was the injured party. Once on the Colombo docks, saying goodbye to a recently married couple, my father, jealous at my mother's articulate emotion, dove into the waters of the harbor and swam after the ship, waving farewell. My mother, pretending no affiliation, mingled with the crowd back to the hotel. Once again he made the papers, though this time my mother, with a note to the editor, corrected the report, saying he was drunk rather than broken-hearted at the parting of friends. The married couple received both editions of the Ceylon Times when their ship reached Aden. And then, in his last years, he was the silent drinker, the man who once a week disappeared into his room with bottles and stayed there until he was drunk and until he was sober. There, speeches, head dreams, apologies, the gentle letters were composed. With the clarity of architects, he would write of the row of blue flowers his new wife had planted, the plans for electricity in the house, how my half-sister fell near a snake and it had awakened and not touched her. Letters in a clear hand of the most complete empathy, his heart widening and widening and widening to all manner of change in his children and friends, while he himself edged into the terrible acute hatred of his own privacy, till he balanced and fell the length of his body, the blood screaming in the empty reservoir of bones, the blood searching in his head without metaphor.